Okay, so we are going to be working on the worksheet 4 in line, where we are going to factor our equations to find solutions. So for number 1, I first want to get my equation in standard form, where it's in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So in order to do that for the first one, I'm going to need to add 10 to both sides, so that zeroes out. So that leaves me with h squared plus 11h plus 10 equals 0. Okay, so now I'm ready to factor to get my factored form. So here my a is going to be 1, my b is going to be 11, and my c is going to be 10. And since a equals 1, I don't need the box. So I can go ahead and do my a times my c. So 1 times 10 gives me 10. And 2 factors of 10 that add up to give me 11 would be 1 and 10. So my factored form would be x plus 1 times x plus 10 equals 0. Now to find my roots, which is another name for x-intercept, I have to take each one of my factors and set them equal to 0 and solve them. So first I have x plus 1 equals 0. So here I would just need to subtract 1 from both sides, and I would get that x equals negative 1. So x equals negative 1 is one of my roots. And then for the other one, would be x plus 10 equals 0. So I subtract 10 from both sides. That's going to 0 out. And I get x equals negative 10. So that is my other root of this equation. Okay. So number 2, same thing. I'm going to have to subtract 9z first, so I can get my equation in standard form. So that would give me 2z squared minus 9z plus 9 equals 0. So now I'm ready to start factoring. So a equals 2, b equals negative 9, and c equals 9. And since a is not 1, I'm going to go ahead and start filling out my box here. So I have 2z squared in the top left and 9 in the bottom right. So now I can do my a times my c, which gives me 18, and 2 factors of 18 that add up to give me negative 9 would be negative 6 and negative 3. So I'm going to use negative 6x in the top right and negative 3x in the bottom left, and I'm sorry, z. And then I'm going to start factoring out. So in the first column, they share a GCF of z, and in the second column, they share a GCF of 3, and in the top row, they share a GCF of 2z, in the bottom row, they share a GCF of 3. Now, since both of these values are negative, that means my 2 factors are going to have subtraction signs in them. So then my factored form would be z minus 3 times 2z minus 3 equals 0. So now I'm going to take each of my factors and set them equal to 0 and solve for z so that I can find my zeros, because again, this is another name for x-intercept. So the z minus 3 equals 0. I need to add 3 to both sides, and then I would get z equals 3. And let's see, 2z minus 3 equals 0. Here I have to add 3 to both sides, and I get 2z equals 3, and then I divide by 2 on both sides. So this one's going to be z equals 3 over 2. Okay. So zeros are also called, let's say, solutions and x-intercepts. All right. So going on to number 3 now. So here again, I'm going to have to add 2x to both sides so I can get my equation in the standard form. So that'd be x squared plus 2x minus 3 equals 0. So now I'm ready to factor. So I have a equals 1, b equals 2, c equals negative 3. I do my a times my c is negative 3, and 2 factors of negative 3 that add up to give me 2 would be negative 1, 3. And since I have an a value of 1, I don't need to use the box, so I can just go ahead and write my factors as x minus 1 and x plus 3 equals 0. So now I need to just set each one of these equal to 0 and solve. So for x minus 1 equals 0, I just have to add 1 to both sides. That zeroes out, so now I have x equals 1. So one of my answers is 1. And then the other one is x plus 3 equals 0. I need to subtract 3 from both sides. Then I get x equals negative 3. So negative 3 is my other solution. And I just put this in solution set form. Okay. Number 4, it says which equation has a solution of x equals 3.5 and x equals 1. So here I'm going to have to work backwards. So if I have x equals 1, and that means I would subtract 1 from both sides to get this to 0 out, and there I would have x minus 1 equals 0. And then for my 3.5, so x equals 3.5, again I have to subtract negative 3.5 from both sides. That zeroes out, so then I would have x minus 3.5 equals 0. So my factors would be x minus 1 and x minus 3.5. So right away I can see I can get rid of d, and I can get rid of a because I don't have an x minus 2. So now I need to determine if it's c or b. So I'm going to take c here. If I took 2x minus 7, set that equal to 0, I would first add 7, zero that out, and I would have 2x equals 7, then I divide by 2. So then I'd have x equals 7 divided by 2, which is my 3.5. So C is going to be my answer. Okay, so then for number 5, this time I'm going to have to add 3m to both sides to get my equation in standard form. So that would be 2m squared plus 3m minus 5. So now I'm going to start factoring. So let's see, I would have a equals 2, b equals 3, and c equals negative 5. I'll make sure I set this on equal to 0. Okay, so since my a value is not 1, I'm going to go ahead and have to use the box. So in the top left, I'm putting 2m squared. In the bottom right, I'm putting negative 5. So now I can do my a times my c, which gives me negative 10. And 2 factors of negative 10 that add up to give me 3 would be negative 2 and 5. So then I'm going to use negative 2m in the top right and 5m in the bottom left. And now I'm ready to start factoring out. So the first column has a GCF of m, and the second column has a GCF of negative 1. And then in my top row, they have a GCF of 2m, and the bottom, they have a GCF of 5. So my factored form would be 2m plus 5 and m minus 1 equals 0. Now to find my roots or my zeros, this is where I have to set each of my factors equal to 0 and solve for them. So the 2m plus 5 equals 0. I would first subtract 5 from both sides. So then I get 2m equals negative 5. And then I'm just going to divide each side by 2. So then I have m equals negative 5 over 2. And then for my other one, m minus 1 equals 0. I add 1 to both sides to solve for m, and I get m equals 1. So that would be my other solution, or root or 0. Okay, so roots are also known as, we can just go ahead and say zeros. Okay, so now flipping over to the back side, starting with number 6. So this time, this one's already in standard form, so I don't have to move anything around. Just have to rewrite it down here. So now I can start factoring. So I have a equals 1, b equals 4, and c equals negative 5. And since my a is 1, I don't need to use my box, so I can go ahead and do my a times my c, which gives me negative 5. And 2 factors of negative 5 that add up to give me 4 would be negative 1 and 4. So that means my factors would be x minus 1 and x plus 4 equals 0. And then whenever I set each one of these factors equal to 0, I would get that x equals 1 and x equals negative 4. So in this time, I'm going to write them, well, I'll just put that x equals 1 and negative 4. Okay, Number 7, so I want to find the factors of negative 7 over 2 and negative 2. So let's first start with x equals negative 7 over 2. So to get rid of this fraction, the first thing I need to do is multiply 2 to both sides. So then that gives me 2x equals negative 7, and then to get 7 on this side, I just need to add it. So then I would have 2x plus 7 as one of my factors. And then for this x minus equals negative 2, I just need to add 2 to both sides. So then I get x plus 2 as my other factor. So that means B is my correct choice. Okay. So number 8 says, what are the x-intercepts of the graph of the quadratic function f of x equals 2x squared plus x minus 6? So I'm going to have to first factor. So I have a equals 2, b equals 1, and c equals negative 6. And since my a value is not 1, I'm going to have to use my box here. So then I would have in the top left the 2x squared, and the bottom right negative 6. So now I can do my a times ic, which gives me negative 12, and two factors of negative 12 that add up to give me 1 would be negative 3 and 4. So that gives me negative 3x and 4x. So now I'm ready to start factoring out. So in my first column, they have a GCF of 2x. In my second column, they have a GCF of negative 3. And then in my top row, they have a GCF of x. And then my bottom row, they have a GCF of 2. So that means my factors would be x plus 2 and 2x minus 3 equals 0. So I'm recording over here, so you don't hear me talking. I know it sounds like I'm talking to myself, but I'm not. This is right. There you go. Okay. Alright, so now if I take the x plus 2 equals 0 and solve for x, I would just subtract 2 from both sides and get that x equals negative 2. So right away I can get rid of D, and I can get rid of B because it has to be a negative 2. And then my 2x minus 3 equals 0. I know when I solve for x, it's not going to come out to be this 0, so I can get rid of C. So that means my final answer would be A. Okay, number 9. Leslie wants to solve the equation x squared plus 2x minus 3 equals 20 by using the factoring method. What should be her first step? So remember, we want to get our equation into our standard form where it's set equal to 0. So what she would need to first do is subtract 20 from both sides. Okay. All right. So now number 10. We have x squared minus 16 equals 0. This is already in my standard form. So I can go ahead and rewrite this without having to move anything around. So now I'm going to start factoring. So I have a equals 1. B is going to be 0 because I don't have a b term. And c equals negative 16. Since a is equal to 1, I don't have to use the box here. So I can go ahead and just do my a times my c, which gives me negative 16. And two factors of negative 16 that add up to give me 0 would be negative 4 and 4. So that means my factored form would be x minus 4 times x plus 4 equals 0. And so then I would set each one of them, of my factors, equal to 0 to solve. So for the x minus 4 equals 0, I would get x equals 4. And for the x plus 4 equals 0, I would get x equals negative 4. So therefore my roots would be, and I'm going to write it as a point, it would be 4, 0 and negative 4, 0. Because remember, our roots or our solution or our zeros, they are the x-intercept. So that's what form I've written it in. Okay, so number 11, it says the area of a square flower bed is 60 feet squared. The length is 11 feet longer than the width. And it's given us the equation x times x plus 11 equals 60, where they want us to find the flower bed, or the dimensions of the flower bed. So let's see, if I were to say that let's say x equals 6, so then I would take 6 times 6 plus 11 to see if it equals 60. So 6 times 6, 17 equals 60, and I can tell you right away that I wouldn't get 60 from this, so I know it's not going to be A. Okay, so let's say x equals 4. So then I would have 4 times 4 plus 11 equals 60. So 4 plus 11 would give me 15. So 4 times 15 is 60, which equals 60. So therefore my answer would be B. Okay. So let's see, the rectangle below has an area of 45 meters squared, and they use the length times the width to find the area. So now they want us to find the dimensions by using this x and x plus 4. So my equation would be x times x plus 4 equals 45. So then, since I don't have a calculator, I'm going to have to just go ahead and solve it. So first I would distribute my x, and that would give me x squared plus 4x, and then I would subtract 45 from both sides. So now I would be able to factor out. So I would have a equals, and using my equation over here, 1, b equals 4, and c equals negative 45. I'd have to do my a times my c, which would give me negative 45, and 2 factors of negative 45, that'll add up to give me 4, would be 9 and negative 5. So that means my factors would be x plus 9 and x minus 5. So then whenever I solved each one of these, or when I set each one of these factors equal to 0 and solved, I would get that x equals negative 9 and x equals 5. So negative 9 or 5. So it means x equals negative 9 or 5. So which x value does not make sense? It doesn't make sense for me to have a negative dimension, so I'm going to cross up negative 9. So that means 5 is one of my dimensions, so if I plug it in to this one right here, I would have 5 plus 4, and that would give me 9, so that's my other one. And that's it for this worksheet on 4 in a line.